What's happening, financial coaches? It's Pete here. Just wanted to do a hot take on a question that I got. And it's an interesting question because the answer isn't that simple. And a very coachy thing for me to do is just say that it depends. So the question here is, what percentage of a household take home pay should go towards daycare costs before it doesn't make sense anymore? And you have probably seen this even maybe before you were in financial coaching. Someone is working a job, maybe you have two incomes, and then someone quits their job to stay home because the cost of daycare, the take home pay doesn't cover it. And they say, I might as well just quit and raise my own child. We'd rather have someone at home anyway. Sometimes there's enough money to cover daycare costs, and they still just want to rather be at home, raise their child, step away from work. Sometimes it's not the first child, sometimes it's the second or third child. So now when you have two children in daycare or they're overlapping, now the costs are higher than what one income would bring in, right? There's just a myriad of different situations here. I've seen it, I've been there. Some people have the ability to do daycare and then also have some family support, some in law support. Maybe they have people at church, maybe they do a babysit sharing kind of arrangement. Whatever. You've probably seen a myriad of these things if you have kids of your own, if you have family members with kids, live in a community with kids. And basically, what I wanted to say here is that I have in my travels seen some formulas, just rough formulas. If daycare is more than 20% more than your take home pay, then you should lose the one income. What I'm saying here is that I almost never weigh in on this unless I am having the conversation with the person who is dealing with it, because the situation is so different. One thing that I think about is just your network support. So that's something I actually talk in detail about, because it's not just about daycare costs, but it can be anything. If you live in an area where you are surrounded by family, you have maybe both sets of grandparents around you, maybe you have a sister or a brother or your parents. So my neighbor, she has kids. Her sister also has kids. Her parents live literally 4 blocks down the street. Her sister lives on our street 2 houses down. So they are able to just go to other people's houses at will. And the issue of having paid daycare is laughable because there's so much support, not to mention the in-laws and what the neighbors would do and all these other things. So they don't need much, if any, financial support for daycare. On the other hand, you may have grown up in one area and you moved to another area. So you don't have a lot of network. You're not a member of a church. You don't have a work community or friends or family or in-laws. So you might have none of that network support, and those can make big differences. The other thing that I would say is that you may not be in a job where stepping away from it makes a lot of sense, even for a short period of time. So if there's a situation where you have to have certain licenses or certifications, and if you leave your job, they expire. There might be a situation where you're a nurse, and if you leave the workforce for 5 or 6 years, they may not want to hire you back right away without taking recertifications. Or you could be in financial services, or you might have, I was thinking about some licenses around teaching or legal expertise or whatever it is. And an interruption to your work would look bad on your ability to get another job, right? So maybe they just don't want someone who's been out of the game for 5 years. If you have been out of financial services or banking or investment management for 5 years, it's not that you can't go back in, but there may have been innovation in that space that you're just not caught up in. Certainly medicine or law could be the same way. And so they want people who are fresh, who have been doing it, not necessarily someone whose latest experience or relevant work experience was a few years ago. So there are just some people who can't necessarily step away from work. Now, there are some other roles where you might actually be able to take a year off, 2 years off, right? If you teach middle school. So my wife is a school teacher, and when she took maternity leave, you're able to do that. It's a good portion of the year. On top of that, a lot of teachers have accrued sick days and things where they can take off the whole year, the 2 years sometimes. So you can go back and you're actually guaranteed your role. And if you've got your lesson plans and teach those same lesson plans, maybe stepping away is not that hard. It just depends. I'm just spitballing here, throwing out some for examples, but the reality is some people just can't leave their industry and expect to come back when they want to, expect to take 4 or 5 years off until the kids get into school and then they go back to work. Now, some people will, And some people may not mind not necessarily having the career advancement that they would have. So I do know an attorney, and when she had kids, she stayed home, raised the kids. Once the kids went off to school, she went back to work. She is not technically an attorney anymore. I don't know exactly how those rules work, but she does legal work in a legal department for a company now. She is leveraging her school and her experience, but she wanted to have those years with her child. So, what I'm saying here in my long winded way of saying this is that there are so many variations to this that you really have to understand what people's situations are, whether they're dual income, single income, whether the person that wants to stay at home actually strategically should not be the person that stays at home. I have seen some people that say, hey, I want my wife to stay at home, but she is the breadwinner. She brings in twice as much income as he does. So mathematically, he should stay at home. The other thing that I like bringing up is what other alternatives have you looked at in terms of daycare expenses? Just because daycare for 5 days a week is so much, can you do 3 days a week and 2 days with in laws? Are there some mixes here? Are there some other proportions that we can split up so that your total cost of childcare isn't that high? The other thing I would say is that another friend of mine has hired a nanny. She is $20 an hour for 40 hours a week. That's $800 a week. It's $3,200 a month. And you might like that. You get the benefit of having the child at home, that stability of it, having just one person watch your kid. But $3,200 a month is a lot more expensive than daycare. On the other hand, I also know some people who have had au pairs for a long time. Actually, when I first heard about au pairs, I thought that was the most expensive thing that you could have is someone living in your home, taking care of your kid, being available at odd hours. But au pairs are actually one of the cheapest out of pocket ways to go, as little as $600 a month plus the cost of living. But you do have to take them on vacations and weekends and stuff like that, obviously. But the reality is you might be able to afford something that you didn't think about, and that might give you the freedom and the solution that you're looking for. So, all I'm saying is that there is really no simple math when it comes to daycare costs for kids. You really got to understand what that household is working with, what their objectives are, what the ratio of incomes are, so that you can come up with something that works for them. And the other thing I would say here is that you don't necessarily have to be married to a plan either, right? Just because you don't sign up for daycare in the first couple months doesn't mean you can't put a kid in daycare 2 months afterwards after trying something that maybe didn't work. Maybe you are trying something, you find something that better that works, and you pull your kids out of daycare, whatever it might be. So this is just one that has come up a couple times where people have said, I don't make enough money take home after taxes to pay for daycare, so I'm going to quit. I feel like that's an obvious answer. And the reality is, if you help people think through that a little bit, that might be the answer, right? Daycare might be $1,800 a month, or take home pay might be $1,400 a month. So it makes sense to just stay home. But they may be maxing out their 401k. They may be getting benefits. They may be getting stock options and seniority and vesting on their 401k match and accruing additional vacation time and all these other things that are above and beyond just whatever the take home pay is. So that's all I'm trying to bring up here is just that there are many dimensions to this. It's not a super easy answer. And in the same situation, the same numbers between two different couples, maybe different priorities, will result in a different choice. Hopefully that helps, but that is my very coachy way of saying that it depends. And that's what we are here for as financial coaches, not just to have hard and fast rules, but to actually work with people in their specific situations to come up with solutions. So hopefully that helps. I'll see you later.